Hello everybody and welcome to another video here on the Wooden Otter. Today we're doing a little bit of a different video. We're going to talk about the costs of building one of my leather-bound D&D rulebooks. Specifically the brown and brass rulebook that I've made on a previous YouTube video. I want to break down the costs. A lot of people were asking what that book cost. And so I want to just go over a little bit of the material costs with you, and make sure that everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about when I make one of these book videos, and basically make sure that everyone knows that they can build one of these themselves. It's actually not that expensive to make one of these books. The cost breakdown is not going to include tools, because I don't have any way of calculating how much all of my tools cost since I bought them so long ago. But most of this work can be done by hand and with simple hand tools, saws, chisels, drills, etc. So if we're not counting tools, this is going to be the cost breakdown for a Dungeons & Dragons rulebook tome from start to finish. So we begin here, as all good things, in Amazon. In Amazon, the first thing I'm going to be purchasing is the actual rulebooks. Luckily, all three rulebooks are actually right down here, and so you can purchase the Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, and Dungeon Master's Guide for a sum total of $84.01. Plus taxes if you live in a state with taxes, but I'm not going to be calculating that here in this video. So the rulebooks themselves, current prices as of mid-March 2021 are $84 basically. Now in terms of rebinding the book, the first thing you're going to want to get is actually a good glue. In my original book video I had used Elmer's glue, which Elmer's white glue is fine. It's really not great as an adhesive. So I do suggest getting some Jade PVA adhesive. The website that I'm buying this from is a bookbinding supply website based out of New York City called Talus. They've actually been around for a long time. And if you ever are in New York and you have a chance to go there, as in after COVID is done, since I think their showroom is shut down right now, I would suggest doing it because you can touch all the stuff. You can feel the leathers, you can see everything that they have to offer, all of the papers and leathers and things like that. And it's just a really nice store to see exactly what you're buying. So Jade PVA adhesive, really not that expensive. A pint of it should last you for a long time. PVA is acid-free, basically. It's archival quality, so it won't degrade your books over time or break down. So $12.60, not that expensive. The bookbinding cord, which is actually the ridges on the spine, they're the structural member that ties the three rule books together. Again, not that expensive, but I do get the thick boys, the real thick cords, because I want my book bands, the spinal bands, to stand out. So it's, $16.50. You just need one, because you're not actually going to be using very much of this. It's only, a few inches, like 5-6 inches per band that you're tying on. So if you have a 5-band book, it's 5 of those 6-inch pieces. So really a spool of bookbinding cord should last you for a good long while. Sewing the books to the book cords, the linen book cords, you need a thread. So this is just a standard sewing thread, not too thick, not too thin, but $13 more, and you have enough thread to sew at least one book together, all to those linen bookbinding cords. Now, one thing that I will suggest you don't cheap out on is the bookbinding board. It's basically a cardboard, a specialized cardboard for bookmaking. And the reason you don't want to cheap out on this is because if you get thinner boards or cheaper boards that aren't made for bookbinding, they have a tendency to curl. A lot of people don't realize that paper and cardboard have a grain. The way they're laid out when they're made in the machine actually imparts a grain to the paper. It's a little harder to notice with bookboard, but it becomes very noticeable. If you've ever looked at a book, if you look at it edge on, sometimes you can see that the cover actually has a very slight bow in it, and that's basically the grain of the bookboard showing through. After you get it wet with the adhesive and you put the leather on the front and the end paper on the back, it will actually curve. So binder's board, the specialized board that you buy from Talus, is much less susceptible to that. What I do is, on top of that, is I will actually sandwich multiple layers together, like in my black book, where I sandwiched a frame around each cover and then I decorated it with the diamonds and whatnot on the inside. That second layer, sandwiching together, actually adds even more structural strength to the covers and fights off the tendency for inferior bookboards to warp. So, using multiple layers and buying quality binder's board like this one really go a long way towards fending off warping. So now we get to the meat and potatoes of the binding task, and that is the leather. One thing that you absolutely do not ever want to do is put regular old leather on your book. If you go onto Amazon and you just buy a piece of leather, there's two likely outcomes. One, the leather you buy is going to be very thick, or too thick, almost no matter what. And so it's not going to be great for bookbinding because you're going to have to pare down the edges so much to get them to fold over the edges of the book cover, the book board for the cover, that it's going to be basically unusable. This French split goatskin is extremely thin. It's actually like less than 1 millimeter thick, and it's very supple, and yet it still takes embossing well, so if you do end up getting into gilding, a goatskin will really take embossing well, and it's really nice. And the fact that it's goatskin, and it's actually it's vegetable tanned. You can see here it's veg tanned. If you get a leather off of Amazon, there are odds that it's either going to be too thick, as I mentioned before. It's going to be fake leather, pleather, which is what my brown book is actually made out of, which I'm not too happy about, but I didn't know any better at the time. So if you buy pleather, basically, offline, off of Amazon, you won't be able to do any kind of embossing or gilding with it, because if it's not vegetable tanned, it actually springs back from the embossing and it won't keep the impression. So if you're going to be making a quality, historically accurate bound book, you really want this French split goatskin. And I mean, just look at it. Like, look at the color. The next book I make is definitely going to be green, because this is a gorgeous piece of leather. I've selected first quality because it's the best quality, but if you want to save a little bit on price, you can pick the second quality. There's a chance that you're going to get a perfectly fine piece of leather, but there's also a chance that you're going to find blemishes or holes or uneven color in your leather if you pick second quality. But so they're currently out of stock on green, but they have a delightful range of colors, and they do have other goatskin options on the website, but I prefer the French split goatskin because it has the best color range, basically. But maroon is also nice. Like, look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. Ooh, evergreen. That's even darker green. I might like that. But yeah, they have a really nice selection of colors and qualities and sizes. You can get away with 4 square feet. You shouldn't need to have more than that, but if you're going to be doing like a smaller book to go with it, let's just say you're going to make an adventuring journal to go with your rule book. Maybe you get 5 square feet, 6 square feet, whatever it is, and use it for that other project. So there's always uses for leather. The next step is the end papers. The papers that go in between the inside of the front and back cover and the first and last pages of your book. So basically it's a sheet of paper folded in half, glued into the front cover, and glued along the spine of the actual text block. And it basically has a decorative pattern and makes the inside cover of your book look real nice. So they have multiple marbled papers here on the website. I just picked German hand marbled paper because I liked some of the patterns here, and no matter what marbled paper you end up picking, it is around $20 per sheet. I think if you look at the dimensions, you can get away with 1 sheet. So an end sheet for a D&D rulebook needs to be at a minimum 17 by 11, because the rulebook is roughly 8.5 by 11. So you need, since you're folding the end sheet over, you're doubling it up, you need 2 times 8.5, which is 17 by 11. So you can get that twice out of 18.5 by 24.5. You basically cut it in half so that the 24.5 is now 12.25, and you end up with 2 sheets that are 18.5 by 12.25, which is more than enough for 1 book. You have 2 sheets of that size, and you can make 1 book with matching end papers on both sides. So, and it ends up looking really nice. There's nothing like opening a book and finding a hand marbled sheet of paper on the inside. It's just delightful. Ochre blue. Man, that's a good color. So, before you even get to the cover, you need to sew a headband, basically. So headband thread is not that expensive. It's $6 or $7 basically for a spool. And if you want a 2-colored headband, you need to buy 2 of them. So it's really, you're looking at $12 to $14 for 2 colors of silk thread in order to sew up a headband. And it's just a fine silk thread that you can make really nice headbands with. For bookmarks, I just went on the Michaels website and I looked up ribbon. Ribbon's dirt cheap. It's $1. It's $1, and you get a bunch of different colors. You can go to a Michaels or a Hobby Lobby or whatever the hell you live next to and find ribbon for almost nothing. You only need, a foot per bookmark. So if you want 3, 4, 5 bookmarks per book, go ahead and do it. It's, you can spend $1 and get enough feet to make tons of bookmarks. Have at it. So, the next thing that I think you'll need in order to make specifically a Dungeons & Dragons rulebook into a leather-bound book is you're going to need a piece of leather that's going to basically cover the spine in order to even out the look of 3 different spines of books sewn together. It looks kind of like it has edges or facets if you don't cover it. So basically, after you sew the text block together, you can put small pieces of leather in between the spinal cords and small pieces of leather over the cords. And in order to do that, it really smooths out the spine. It makes it look really great if you do this, because you can't tell from the outside of the spine that it's 3 books tied together. So I just, have a couple bucks and use some scrap leather. 1.5 millimeters should be more than enough to even out the look of the spine. Finally, if you're going to be using whatever tools you may have on hand in order to cut metal corners. You can totally buy pre-made metal corners. You can find those on Amazon or really anywhere. They make decorative brass corners all the time. But if you're going to make them from scratch the way I did, you just need a sheet of brass. And you can either follow the methodology in my video, where I use a spray paint, resist, and then a laser cutter, and then muriatic acid in order to etch a design into your brass plates for corners. Or you can use any other method at your disposal. Drills, saws, chisels, batteries in order to acid etch them. There's so many ways to design with metal. You can get some of those metal gravers and basically just like hand carve a design into your corners and cut them out with a coping saw. It's really up to you, but there's nothing quite like a brass sheet when you can just go ape with your, artistic designs and come up with whatever you want. But a 12-inch by 12-inch, fairly thin sheet should be more than enough to build up your metallic corners for your book. So, I basically compiled this spreadsheet in order to summarize all of the costs. And you can see the costs do build. You might not realize it, but your big prices are going to be your cover leather, basically, is your big price, and then the actual rule books themselves. The Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual together make up $84, and the leather makes up $75 of the total cost. But if you're not counting tools and your own time, labor, in terms of materials, you can get this project done for under $300. Plus shipping and taxes and all those things. But in terms of actual materials, less than $300 to make yourself a delightful leather book. If you do have some leather at home and you don't want to spend $75 on a French split goat skin, or you want to buy untanned leather, veg tan or veg tanned undyed leather and try dyeing it yourself, I went online and I just found this leather weight to thickness chart, and what you're looking for is either a 2 or 3 ounce piece of leather is a good thickness for bookbinding. You can get thinner, and it should work fine. So if you've got a 1 to 2 ounce piece of leather, it should work fine. It'd be 0.5 millimeter thick. It's a little on the thin side, and I wouldn't recommend that for embossing or gilding activities. So if you're going to be putting gold leaf design or whatever into your cover, I don't suggest going that thin. But if you happen to have a piece of leather, or you find an undyed piece, you can totally use something on the thinner end for bookbinding. But all in all, materials cost of the bound rule books for D&D, less than $300. I believe that's within a lot of people's price range for something that will end up with that touch of uniqueness. It'll come from each person. Each person's book is going to be slightly different. No one's book is going to look exactly like mine. And I think that's within everyone's price range, or most people's price range, for what will essentially be a centerpiece, a collector's item for your game. Something you can at least show on the table and say, hey, this is my rule book. I made it myself. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it and showing people that this project is totally doable and within their power. So if you did enjoy this video, go ahead and leave a like or subscribe. I really appreciate it. The channel really appreciates it. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next time here on the Wooden Otter. Peace!